priorities and our resources so that we can also be a touch point and a resource for our community, as Renata mentioned, through both mitigation, and recovery. We are in it for the long haul, and we are so grateful that you are in it with us, and that we can lean on the expertise of our members and those within our community to be able to provide much needed resources and information to you, our members, when you need it most. And so today we are going to be focusing on the loan application that's available through the SBA and what are some of the funding mechanisms. We have Janie Sacco from US Metro Bank who will be walking us through the application process. And then we also have Phon and Rich from the SBDC. They will be able to walk through some of the other necessary steps that or questions that you might have, as a small business owner. So again, welcome. We're so grateful to have you here. And now Renata is going to put up a poll just so that we can see. We're now at over 98 attendees here for this, our first smart webinar, for what is your current business structure. So you should be able to see it up there on your screen if you could go ahead and participate. Janie will need that information to help guide her presentation. Thank you.
While those responses are coming in, just a quick bit of housekeeping. Everybody has been placed on mute, all attendees at this time. When we do get to the Q&A portion, I'll be monitoring that and will unmute you individually when the appropriate time comes. But just for the sake of keeping things clean and clear so that everybody can hear, all attendees are currently on mute. One thing to note, if you are currently seeing all of our faces large on our screen and not one primary face, then you are in the speaker view. And so I encourage you to hover your cursor over at the top right corner of your screen and make sure that it's on gallery view. And with gallery view, you'll be able to see a larger image of the active speaker, as well as being able to see the visuals that we share on the screen. And then when we get to the Q&A portion, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question, down on your main controls at the bottom here, if you click on the participants icon, then a panel will show up on the right side of your screen. And at the bottom of that panel, you'll see options to mute and unmute yourself and raise and lower your hand. And so when you raise your hand, I will see that. And I will know that you have a question that you want to ask, and that's how we will manage. I see, yep, Jennifer Ness, thank you for testing that out. Diane, thank you. So go ahead and give that a try. Make sure you can see that option there. Perfect. And as always, you can type a question or type your message down in the chat at any time, and I'll be monitoring that as well. Okay, Jennifer Ness is not just testing. She wants to know if this is being recorded, and the answer is yes. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing later on. Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the poll and turn it back over to Andrea. We'll give you about 10 more seconds. Looks like half of us have voted. So please make sure to vote in the poll. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, ending the poll. And now I'm going to share the results so that our panelists can see. It looks like 16% of those voted are sole proprietorships, and 84% are either LLC, corporations, or partnerships. So that is who's in the room today and what their business structure is. And with that, Andrea, take it away.
Perfect. All right. Again, thank you so much, Renata, and thank you all so much for being here. So our first subject matter expert is Janie Sacco, and she's been a member of our chamber for a long time and a wonderful asset and resource for small business. She's also a small business owner herself, and so she doesn't just talk the talk, but she walks the walk, which is why we're so happy that she's able to be here today and walk us through a short PowerPoint presentation and do some Q&A on the actual SBA forms and the EIDL application. So I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to share my screen so that we can start the PowerPoint presentation. So Janie, I'm going to take it over to you.
Thank you, Andrea and Renata and Rich and Phon for putting this all together. Excuse me. Okay, so what we're going to talk about this morning is basically the SBA Disaster Economic Injury Disaster Loan product that is, you apply through the SBA Disaster website. And I'm going to go over a brief application document review and of the process, the forms, and then we're going to transition over to images of each individual form, and I will go over those with you. So let's go on to the next slide. First of all, where do you find the documents? Well, you go to the website indicated on the screen. It is specifically an SBA application, and the SBA is doing the direct funding of this program. You do not go through a bank. So you do go to sba.gov/disaster assistance. You will get a link over to applying for a loan. You will find all of the disaster loan submission forms on that site, and you will also be able to upload all of your application documents on that site. It's an outstanding resource for you as a small business owner to have all of the information in one place. Next. So what do you need to submit first to the SBA? Well, there are 2 documents that you're going to need to do, and depending upon your legal structure, will define which Form 5 you use. So if you are a limited liability company or either of the corporation statuses, Sub S or C corporation, or you're any form of partnership, you will use Form 5. If you are a sole proprietorship, then you have a different form, and it is Form 5C. The other form that all of you would need to do is Form P015, and that is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan supporting information. And it's really just a summary of your historic income and pre-disaster. All right, and we are going to walk through each of these forms and for you later as we get through the process. But what I want you to know specifically about Form 5 and Form 5C is that you are applying in the business name, and you are identifying all of the owners of your business, and then you're also going to identify what other businesses you have more than 50% ownership of. That is all relevant to all the data collection that the SBA needs. Next. So the next question is, what happens after you submit these 2 documents? Well, right now, the website is indicating that a disaster loan officer will review your application. And that review process should take maybe 2 to 3 weeks. However, after talking with the staff yesterday and last week, depending on the volume of applications that they get, you may need to plan for a 4 to 6 week turn time. The SBA disaster loan officer will actually calculate the amount of the loan that they feel you need. So when you're putting your application together, you are not indicating a specific dollar amount you want to borrow. The loan officer on the SBA disaster side will actually calculate it for you based on the information that you submit. If the SBA disaster loan officer feels like they need more information, they will send you an email saying these are the additional pieces of information that they want to have. Their expectation in the email is that you will respond and provide that information within 7 calendar days. Next. So what are some of the additional forms outside of the Form 5 or 5C and the P019 form? There are about a half a dozen forms, and the first one that we have on the list is the fee disclosure form and compensation agreement. And all of these forms have a reference number, and as a lender, we use them all the time. But to make this easy, what I just want you to understand is what the form does and have the form number as a reference so that you have all of the information. So for example, the fee disclosure form and compensation agreement document, you only need to do that form if you paid someone to help you prepare the application documents. If you did not pay anybody and you did them yourself, then you do not need to do that form. The next one that all of you will have to do at some point is the personal financial statement form. It is SBA form 413D. And what I want you to understand there is that it's all about you as a 20% or more owner in the business you're applying for this loan for, all right? So you're only listing your personal assets like cash, vehicles, maybe accounts receivable, stocks, bonds. If you have a home, the market value of the home, any rental property that you may have. Whatever assets you have personally will be listed on this form. It's also a listing of who you owe money to in your personal name. So do not put business debt obligations on that particular form as a liability, because they will be captured in the business debt section later on. Next. The request for transcript of tax returns, which is actually an IRS form, affectionately known as the 4506T document. This document allows the SBA to request a summary transcript of what you have filed. The forms are pre-populated for 2017 and 2018 return information. So what you need to think about is that you will be asked to provide an IRS 4506T form for you personally and for your business tax returns if you file separately. If you are a sole proprietorship and or your business files through a Schedule C on your personal return, if you're a limited liability company or a sub-S corporation, then you will only be doing a 4506T form for your personal returns. At the start of the application process for this disaster loan, it replaces the need initially for you to submit personal and business tax returns to the SBA. You may be asked to provide copies of them later, but the SBA disaster loan officer will indicate that in the email correspondence that they have with you. You will be asked to do one 4506T form for the borrowing business, again, for each 20% owner in the borrowing business, and for each business you or another owner of 20% or more in the borrowing business have more than 50% ownership in. I know that's really confusing, so I'm going to give you a real quick example. If I have a legal entity that I am the owner of at 20%, then I will be doing a 4506T for my company. And if I own more than 50% of another company, I will be doing a 4506T form for that company as well. And we'll go through these forms individually so you'll understand the documents themselves. Next. Okay, the schedule of liabilities, which is SBA form 2202. This is a real critical document because it identifies for the borrowing business, the applicant business, who the business owes money to. Personal debts are not listed here. You've already taken care of that in the personal financial statement document. The SBA does use the information on the 2202 form to help determine what your business's fixed monthly payments are, because the fixed monthly payments are part of the borrowing that is eligible under this disaster relief loan product. So what you want to do is make sure that you're listing, again, all of the business debts on this document, along with the monthly payments and additional information, which we'll go over in a few minutes. There is another document called the Additional Filing Requirements. It's Form 1368. And what you're doing there is you are putting information about the historical revenue of your business on a monthly basis for up to the last 3 years, and for 2020 for January, February, and March. So what this does is it helps the disaster loan officer visualize how much money you have been making monthly since you have been in operation or over the last 3 calendar years, as opposed to what's happening right now, because that's part of your economic injury. Next. So while Andrea is transitioning over to the document portion of this, are there any questions that you have?
I will take on that. We've had several questions come in about whether this applies to nonprofits. Are they eligible for organizations that have no owners? And this last one kind of comments that they heard that if they don't do layoffs, then it will turn into a grant. So there's kind of 2 questions there: how it applies to nonprofits, and what happens if with that piece about not doing any layoffs.
Okay, so what business types are covered under the disaster loan product are for-profit entities, nonprofit entities, and landlords. And just to clarify, under the regular SBA product, nonprofits and landlords typically are not eligible for an SBA guaranteed loan. However, with the disaster product, they are. So again, for-profits, nonprofits, and landlords are all eligible to apply for this product. What you're speaking to in terms of the grant piece is what is going on right now, but has not been enacted yet, unless the House has done something while we've been on this
I can give a quick update. The House has passed it, but the president still has to sign it. So that's where we are with the CARES Act.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for the CARES Act, I want to be really careful here and not give you any misinformation. So what's happening is that is a different product than the disaster loan program here. Okay, so going into this presentation, Andrea and I spoke a little bit ago, and we wanted to give you what we have right now that's factual. When that CARES Act rolls out, there will be additional products that will come out of that include the grant and debt relief, loan relief, and it is tied to what appears to be rehiring your employees if they've been laid off, and keeping them on the payroll for a period of time. And what it looked like was at least 90 days. But again, in fairness to not give you bad information, I'm just going to say you do have to retain those employees for a period of time based on the information that I saw prior to us getting on this presentation. Does that answer all of the questions?
All right, I believe that answers that portion. The newest one that has come in, I don't know if this is for maybe a later portion, but I'm seeing now people are asking if they are a newer business, a newer established business of 4 months, 9 months, and they don't have that that full record to be able to calculate their losses, how you might speak to that and what those newer businesses can do.
When we get through the forms, one of the questions asked is have you been in operation for a year? And if you're saying no, that has its own set of problems, right? Because you may not have all of the historical information. What basically what I'm saying is answer the questions, provide the information that you have available, get the documents submitted, get in the queue. The SBA loan officer reviewing your application will make a determination about your eligibility. But there's no harm, no foul to getting an application in. So as we go through the documents, you'll see a little bit more clearly what I'm indicating. So I'm going to go back because I saw a question pop up. Nonprofits are eligible for this disaster loan product. Okay, they are eligible for the disaster product. If you don't have employees, I'm just picking this up from one of the questions. If you don't have employees, the only piece that you're not going to get value out of is the grant potentially, or that loan relief. But having employees or not having employees does not impact. You can apply for this loan, all right? It doesn't matter if you have employees. I'm reading. Okay. For all of the debt forgiveness questions, can we hold that till the end? Because we may have a little bit more clarity on that. If you are the only employee, then you would list yourself as one, but you are the owner. So there are specific rules for how the SBA treats sole proprietor owners or single owners. And you do not follow the same employee rules as if I, as an employer, have 2 or 3 employees. So again, what I want to caution here is that some of the information about the relief portion of this loan is going to come out after the CARES Act is signed. So we don't have answers to some of those things that are truly accurate. But know that that is part of what the CARES Act is coming out with. All right. So let's move on for the sake of time to the actual application documents. The one that is up on the screen right now is the sole proprietor loan application. And what I want you to fill out and think about here is you are applying for the sole proprietors out there. You are applying as a sole proprietor for economic injury. All of these loans are economic injury loans. If there is only one sole proprietor, then you are the primary applicant. And you will be answering all of your questions in the box to the left under primary applicant. If you are married and your spouse is involved in the business, then your spouse would be the joint applicant, and you would answer all of those. Your spouse would answer all of the questions there in that particular box. Marital status, are you a U.S. citizen? Are you an SBA employee? Pretty straightforward. The other information is just factual about you, your name, social security number, date of birth, and pretty basic information. When you go farther down and you're looking at the contact information, please provide contact information that most easily gets a hold of you and what your preferred method of contact is. This is critical for the SBA to get a hold of you efficiently and get through this process quickly for you. Please disregard the damaged property address. That is not relevant because this is an economic injury loan application. For the income information, please indicate for you as a primary applicant, and if there is a joint applicant, how you're employed. If you're self-employed, retired, just check the correct box. Indicate what your annual income is, your adjusted gross income before deductions. Employer, if that's relevant. In my case, I am a small business owner with my husband, but I am also employed outside of that my small business. So I would put my employer's name, contact information, and complete all of that so the SBA is aware of any outside income I would have. And then let's go down to the debts. This is, again, all about you personally. So what you want to do is, if you are lucky enough to not have debts, mark that box and you're done. But if you're like me, I do have a few debt obligations. So I would complete them for whatever is relevant. If I have a mortgage, if I have credit cards, if I have a vehicle loan, etc. That is a section that I would list that information in. And what I would encourage you to do is, if you have more debt lines than are available there, please add another page and just finish completing that information until you have all of your personal debt obligations listed. And what the SBA will be doing is they will be pulling a credit report to validate some of this stuff. So you want to be as accurate and time sensitive with it as possible. And I would encourage you to just start calling all of your creditors and getting the most recent balance information and payment information. The insurance information is specifically related to damaged property, so you do not need to put that information in there. That's not relevant for this. As far as your assets go, the SBA really wants all of your pre-disaster values. So what you want to put in there on line 1, for example, is if you have cash on hand, the balances that you have in your accounts, the values of your marketable securities like stocks, bonds, certificate of deposits, but do not include your retirement account balances, okay? Your retirement account balances on that line would not be there, because what the SBA is trying to determine are what your most liquidatable assets are. All right. You drop down to line 2. That's where you list all of your retirement account balances. And retirement accounts, again, can be IRAs, KIOs, TSPs, 401k plans, a variety of products in there. Okay, and then personal property are things like furniture, appliances, vehicles, RVs, etc., boats, anything that is a hard asset that you own outside of your primary residence, and rental property. So the next line has your primary residence. That's your market value. I would encourage you to go on Redfin or any Zillow or any of the other valuations and just get that dollar amount, because that's mostly how we as lenders validate the market value. If you have any other real estate, you are required to list that, and you may need to provide a separate schedule or additional document to support that based on your asset type. When you're looking at the disclosures, all you're doing there is answering yes or no. If you answer yes to any of those questions, then you will need to provide responses. And if you can do the responses at the bottom of the page, there's a section there that for additional comments. Do so. If you want to, in that, again, the additional comments section, you could put your responses to the yes questions in there, or do a separate page. Really, it doesn't matter. What you want to do is basically just give clear and accurate information in the best way you can. Sometimes things takes a little bit more than the box will allow. So that's just kind of an FYI there. All right. And then if you have a representative that is helping you with this, and you want that, again, you have paid a fee to, the SBA wants to know that. And then the last section of this was just signing your signature as the applicant and that of the joint applicant. So that is basically Form 5, all right? 5C for the sole proprietorships, all right? And then what we're going to do really quickly here is go back and do the Form 5 for the non-sole proprietorships. Okay, this form is a little bit different, but has a lot of the same information. So bear with me if I'm a little bit repetitive, but what I do want to help you with is making sure you get this one completed as accurately as possibly too. So again, in section 1, you are applying for an economic injury loan. In box 2, you will identify the type of legal entity you are. The applicant's legal name, that is the name of your business. You're going to put in the tax ID number or federal employment identification number in box 4. In box 5, if you can't remember what your trade names are, you can go to the Department of Revenue, look up your legal entity name, and you will see a list of all of the trade names associated with your legal entity. And I would encourage you to put them all in there. Please put in your business phone, the mailing address. You can select it as being either the business or home or something else. That's up to you. Number 8 and 9 are all for damaged property. They are not applicable in this application. And then in number 10, again, contacting you is key. So providing a quality email that you check frequently is the key, and the cell number, of course, in case they need to call you. In number 11, you want to go through the business activity. What do you do? Are you a restaurant? Are you a daycare provider? Are you an adult family home? Whatever, just do a real brief description of your business. And then in number 12, again, this is key, list the number of employees pre-disaster, not where you're at right now, but how many people you employed. And if you are active in the business and you are on the payroll, and even if you're not, you are an employee of the business. So include yourself and your spouse or any other owners in there as an employee of the business. So for example, for my husband and my business, we have right now 10 employees that outside of my husband and myself, but the number of employees we would list is 12. Okay, so we have 10 employees plus my husband and myself, so that would be 12 employees. Date business established, that is a date that you legally organized your business. Current management has to do with you, and sometimes this could be a little bit different because the date the business may have been established could have been 30 years ago, but you could have acquired it 5 years ago. So the key here is putting the date the business was established as an operating entity based on really when it was in operation. So for my husband and my business, my husband acquired the business in 2010, but the business was in operation several years prior to that. So the date the business was actually established, ironically, was 101 years ago. But the current management has been since 2010. So that's one way you can look at answering those questions. Again, the amount of estimated loss in 15 and 16 are not applicable because that is for hard asset loss. That is not what we are applying for. As we go to number 17, what I want you to think about the owners here, and you may need to have more pages for this. You have to list the owners who own 20% or more of the business. So this has 2 blocks for 2 business owners. If you have 5 business owners and they all own 20%, then you need to do an addendum page. All right. That one section that says business entity owner, that is only applicable if your business has another business which is an owner of your company. So for example, with my husband and my business, we are 50-50 owners. However, so that would just be me and him there, okay, the 2 of us. However, if I had ABC Corporation as a 30% owner of my business, and my husband and I own 35% each. So the breakdown would be 35, 35, and 30. For ABC Corporation, that is where you would fill out the business entity owner at 30%. In most cases, what you're dealing with is just you, maybe you and a spouse or some other people. Very unlikely that you have a business entity owner as part of your ownership. But that's what that section means, okay? So it may not be relevant. Nonprofits do not have owners. Who do they list? What I would provide there is a list of who is the executive director and who are the directors. And they do not have an ownership, but they may be germane to the application and to decision making based on the organization documents and who is authorized to indebt the nonprofit. So I would list all of those people individually, but I would not put personal information for them. And if the SBA needs additional information, they will ask you for it. Okay, so then in 18, you're just answering yes or no. If you answer yes, again, what you're going to do is at the end of the document there, well, there isn't at the end of this one. I was incorrect there. If you're answering yes to any of the ones in 18, then you're going to have to provide a separate piece of paper to explain your yes response. Okay. And then 19, again, yes, no, and go about that. 20 is not relevant. 21, again, is you only need to complete that if you have paid someone to help you with the application, all right? And then you go through the agreements and certifications and have whoever is authorized to in debt and obligate the company sign on the signature, provide the title and the date. Okay, so that is the Form 5 form, all right, for the things that you have to do. Let's go down to the next page. What I want you to see is on Form 5, there is no page 3. So don't think that it's missing there. It's just not there. You go down to page 4. All right. So don't think your eyes are playing tricks or anything like that. Okay. Toward the top of this page, what it says is filing requirements. And there's 5 boxes there with items. Okay. As of yesterday, in talking to the disaster loan center, what they indicated to me was just have the applicant send in the Form 5 and the Form P019, and not to send in those other documents. But what I am going to say is if you have those forms, like the 4506T and the 2202 form, which we'll be going over in a few minutes, and your personal financial statement, if you have those forms ready, then I would encourage you to upload them along with Form 5 or Form 5C and P019 all at one time. I think it would be helpful for the SBA staff, but certainly if you don't have them ready, just get in the Form 5 or Form 5C and that 2202 form. I'm sorry, excuse me. I meant, I'll do it again. The Form 5 and the Form 5C and the P019 form, okay? And then you do see a little bit of information there for the nonprofits, what you can complete in there. And again, don't send in the tax returns. You don't have to do that. The SBA staff member was emphatic that you do not have to send the tax return information in at the time you do the application. Can you amend a submitted application? Well, okay. What I would say is if you want to send additional information in before you are contacted by the SBA loan officer, then what I would do is reference your business name and the file number if one was provided to you, so that they're able to gather all the information together. I think really for efficiency purposes, you may want to wait until the SBA contacts you with a list of what they need. That would probably be more efficient, but you can amend it. I would just make sure you're, again, putting the business name in there and saying this is send number 2, all right? Because the key here is the SBA, you want to make it easy on the SBA loan officer to assimilate the information and respond to you as quickly as possible.
Janie, we have a question back on line 18D.
Okay.
Andrew, if you could scroll up a bit. And the question is, does a student loan to a corporation owner need to be listed?
Yes, it is a debt obligation that is federally, it's a federal loan, yeah, so yes. Student loans, okay, so here are all of the potential government-related debts. An SBA loan, a USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture loan, a VA, FHA loan, and a student loan. Okay. Are there any other questions on the Form 5 or 5C?
I saw a few come through regarding nonprofits, but I think you addressed that about who they are listing as owners. You addressed that, yes.
Leases are not applicable on the leases are a business obligation. When we get to the Form 413, I am going to indicate where contingent liabilities are identified, but let's hold that one for a minute and we'll get to that question. Okay. All right, let's go on to the 4506T form. I think it's toward the top. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to say this with a little bit of humor. This is the worst form for everybody to fill out. So what you need to do with this is for your personal tax return, look at your return for 2017 and 2018. All right. And if the addresses that you have are different, put a placeholder there. So what I want you to do is go to your 2018 return and list line 1A and line 1B based exactly on who the first name on your return is and the related Social Security number. If you file jointly, you will have to complete 2A and 2B. That is the name of the person that is on the second line of your joint return. And then you put their Social Security number in 2B. On line 3, what you want to do is you want to write down the current name and address as reported on the 2018 return. For line number 4, if you have a different address reported on your 2017 return, you have to put the 2017 address on line 4. Okay? So if you've been at the same address for 17 and 18, line number 4 is blank. All right? Number 5, they've already filled out for you. And just so you don't need to put anything else in there. And when you go down to number 6, that's pre-populated too. The SBA will put in your tax return type in that line box, right by tax transcript requested, enter tax form number here. The SBA will put that in, but they left it blank because they don't know whether it's a 1040, etc. Okay, so that's why that's blank, but let them put that in. Okay, the SBA is requesting a record of account. So they've already populated that box with a little check mark on the right there for 6C. And then what they're asking for is your tax return transcripts for 18 and 17. No problem, they've already populated that. When you get down to the bottom of the box, there is a little box that says signatory attests that he or she has read the attestation. You do need to mark that. The person who signed the return signs on the signature line and puts the current date, and you put your contact phone number in there. All right, so that's for you personally. If you are completing this for a business, then all the same information I told you at the top is the same, okay? At the bottom, underneath your signature, you need to put your title as it appears on your tax return. Okay? There is a spousal signature line. If your spouse is available to sign the form and on your personal tax returns for a jointly filed return, then please, both of you sign it. But that spousal signature is only required on the joint personal return. And for our purposes, if your spouse is not available to sign a jointly filed return, your signature alone is adequate. All right. So even though it says spousal signature, if you are available to, and their spouse is not, one signature will allow the SBA to pull a transcript. Okay. Any questions on that one?
Janie, I have a couple questions from people who have already filed for 2019. Do they use that info for 2019, or do they go back to 2018?
If they have filed 19, then I would add 12/31/19 in the boxes on line 9. The SBA is kind of assuming that people hadn't, and that's why they did not put 19 in there. But if you have, great job and great for you, just put that year in there. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's go to form P019. Okay, I'm a little bit covered up here on the right on the form. Okay, thank you. So this form is actually fairly easy to do. So the question here is, was the business in operation 1 year prior to the disaster? You're going to answer that yes or no. Now there's a lot of gray areas there. What if you bought the business and you just bought the business within the last 9 months? Well, was the business in operation 1 year prior to the disaster? The answer technically is yes, because it was, just not under your management. And think back to that other form where we were talking about how long has the business been in operation and when did the management take over? Okay, this correlates back to that answer. All right. So again, was the business in operation 1 year prior to the disaster? Yes or no. If you're a startup business and you have not been in operation for 12 months, then you have to answer no. I would send the application in anyway. Okay, don't let that preclude you, because as CARES Act rolls out, you may fall into one of those categories for assistance. All right, so don't self-eliminate here. All right, when you're filling out these boxes, the gross revenue for the 12-month period prior to the disaster. Okay, the 12-month period prior to the disaster can either be 2019, all of 2019, or our disaster occurred in what month, Andrea? What would we say for Washington?
We say March, so we would go to when the governor actually, declared the state of emergency. What that date would be the applicable date.
Okay, so what I'm gonna say is that this disaster on the SBA's site for Washington was a little bit earlier than March. Okay, so if we use February or March, all I'm going to tell you is go back 12 months from that, from March. Okay. That way we're all consistent. And you might want to write on there, because you're filling out this form, what period you're running this to. So March 2019 to February 2020. That way the SBA loan officer understands what period you're writing it to. Okay. Cost of goods sold for the same 12-month period that you've identified. If you're a service-based business, you may not have cost of goods sold. That's not applicable. You put 0 in there. All right. And then for rental properties, what you're going to put in there is the lost rents due to the disaster. So how much money did you lose on your rental income? All right. The next box is compensation from other sources. Again, think of what I told you. Okay, I'm going to answer that in a second. Think of what I told you, and the issue of, I do have outside income. Because I'm employed outside. So that would be part of my other sources. As an example, if you have rental income from out of state that was not impacted by the virus as significantly as our area, you may still have income. So please identify, think about it, and identify all of your sources outside of the business that you have as income, and then sign, title, and date this form. All right. Okay. So what was the question that they had?
Trying to see specifically, there are a number of questions that have come in. Okay, so I don't know, earlier you had said you would get back to the question about if a business is a new business. And so that question is still coming through.
Okay. All right, so if you're a new business and you're in this form, what you're going to answer, was the business in operation 1 year prior to the disaster? It's either going to be yes or no. Were you in operation in March of 2019? And then go from there. Because if you've been in operation for only 6 months, then the answer would be no. There is another form, the 2002 form, that is also related to the length of time you've been in operation, and we'll get to that toward the end, because I think that's one of the last forms to do, but we'll get there. So keep a place marker on that one. And then what was the last one that came through? I think it had to do with loans.
Okay, so does other sources include loans received prior to the disaster?
No, that's not compensation. A loan is debt. So loans are not included here. We're talking about sources of actual income, salaries, revenue generation, rental income, stocks and bond income, that your dividends, interest income. Those are, yeah, there you go. Andrea won the lottery. That's an income source for this year. Okay, so that's what they're talking about there.
And how about a federal grant? Is that considered gross revenue?
A federal grant, that's an accounting question. My gut feeling is that it's going to be part of the revenue stream, but a grant's not taxable. So now I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but what do you think, Rich?
I would probably include it in there, and And then when you have the conversation with the loan underwriter, describe that and have the conversation. They're going to make that call. But I would hate to not disclose it and then have the loan be kicked out for some reason like that.
Yeah. Nonprofits are a little bit different because grant sources are your cash received. So if you're a nonprofit filling this out and you get grant income, that is part of your revenue stream. I can't read the entire question there. Renata, can you help out there?
This last one, so the last two comments, someone is reading that as a source that they received as a result of the disaster. So the funds we got because of the disaster, et cetera, it's not regular revenue. So that, I think that's more of a comment and less of a question. The next one is saying that the form is asking for compensation from other sources received. Yeah, again, as a result of the disaster. Not compensation from other sources. So I think folks are just trying to help clarify.
Yeah, okay. All right, compensation from other, all right. Compensation from other sources received as a result of the disaster. Okay. Well, you know what, I'm going to stand corrected. I believe that what you also want to put in there is, yeah, if you as a for-profit received funds from grants, I'll give you an example. In my husband's business, he applied for a neighborhood grant and did receive a little bit of money, so that he would list that, yes. Because that was additional income from other sources as a result of the disaster. Yes. Thank you for clarifying. I actually misread it. So thank you for clarifying that.
And then backing up a bit to those new businesses who answered no, were they in business in March 2019? So the follow-up question is, do they just put their revenue, the amount of revenue that they've received since being open?
Yes. And what I would do is I would write in there, you know, this is the period of this revenue that I'm capturing here. Because the more information that you use to clarify for the SBA loan officer, the better it is for them to get through the process. Any other questions on that one? Thank you for making me clarify.
Let's see, I'm seeing one over here. It says, does the cost of goods sold come directly from the P&L? Do they mean do they mean the line cost of goods sold or your total cost?
The cost of goods sold is,
Rich,
okay, if you're,
sorry, I wonder if Rich, maybe you could take this one,
Sure.
you know, just to kind of go over a little bit more of what those details would be in a P&L for people that might not be super familiar with that. Sure.
Okay. So what they're looking for here is, let's just say you're a shoe manufacturer. Cost of goods sold are going to be all those inputs that you use to make the shoe: the sole, the leather, the stitching. So that's what cost of goods sold is going to be. But it's not going to include things that we call below the line expenses or costs, which might be payroll, insurance, fuel, utilities. So those are not part of cost of goods sold. Now, if you are a professional services, if you do, for example, consulting, and you bill out at a rate of $150 an hour, you do not have any cost of goods sold, typically. So cost of goods sold, again, are just specific costs related to the production of the product that you're selling.
if you're filling this out from a tax return, look for the cost of goods sold line on the return. If you're filling this out from a company prepared document, then what I would encourage you to do is ask your accountant or bookkeeper for the best number there, because the different accountants and bookkeepers prepare the cost of goods sold separately. And sometimes the tax preparers and the bookkeepers don't assign the same expenses and costs in that category. And you can look at your tax return and you can look at your company prepared for 2019 versus the tax return in 18. And if you see a wide difference there, then get your tax preparer to help you determine what that cost of goods number is. Okay.
And I think just as a follow-up, you may have just responded to that, but someone is saying labor that is direct for manufacturing or payroll is typically cost of goods under GAAP and tax. So would you add anything based on that question?
For me, I would say again, for that question, have your tax preparer help you for the 2019 numbers, because they're going to know what they put in historically. So typically, labor that is directly related to the production of product is in cost of goods sold. Okay. But again, I don't want to upset the apple cart with how the tax preparer did the document either. All right. So that's why I would caution to do that.
I have a couple people asking, I know we're not covering the CARES Act today, but the questions have come up is, does applying for this specific opportunity increase, or does it give you a higher queue in relation to the CARES Act? Is there any relation between applying here and the CARES Act?
The best answer I have is I don't know, because that CARES Act really has not been rolled out in terms of the parameters as of before we started this meeting. So what I would say is, and this is my general rule for all lending, is you're not borrowing until you sign on the dotted line for the loan document. So this is what we have for right now. If the CARES Act products come out and they are a better fit economically and within the structure of your business, and they give you better value, then go with those products. All right. I would always go with the best financial opportunity, but I can't see where applying for this, if you were approved for a disaster loan under the EIDL program, and then there is a CARES Act product that comes out that is better, again, go with the one that is better for your business and most appropriately aligns with your needs.
And we'll do another SMART webinar on the CARES Act as soon as the legislation is enacted, that will help answer a lot of these questions that are coming up. But again, as Janie said, this is the best product that we have to help small businesses right now, today at 12:11 p.m. on March 27th, which is why we're going through it so carefully with you, so that you can have a successful application. We certainly know that not all small businesses, will, be accepted to this program, which is why we're continuously advocating and looking for other forms of relief for small business. As Janie also said, it's always good to have something, especially if you're approved. It doesn't mean that you have to take on the debt, but it's a nice backup to have as an alternative. And I believe we have a few more forms to go through, and then we'll take a lot of general questions. Again, Rich and Phon from the SBDC are also here to answer any general business questions that you might have. So Janie, why don't you walk us through the last couple of forms there?
Okay, good deal. All right, so I think we're done with this particular form. Let's go on to the Form 159D. I want to emphasize on this form, you only do this form if you pay someone to help you complete your package. Okay, so let's go down, let's go to page 2 because that's really the most relevant out of this. What you're putting in there for the loan applicant name is your business name. Usually they're going to be the same. So for most of you, I would imagine that would be true. If you have a trade name, you might want to put that in business name, but I would just skip business name because the applicant names should be the same. All right, the type of service here being granted, you have to mark one of these boxes. It's either loan packaging, where someone's helping you put the package together, or they're the financial statements or tax returns prepared specifically for the application. If someone is helping you put them together for this application only, then you would mark that box. And that's different from the money that you paid to your CPA or tax preparer in 17, 18, and even for 19. That is not the same as what they're asking for here. What they're asking for here is if somebody helped you assemble this and put all these numbers together specifically for this application. If you have your tax returns, you're putting that together yourself. Again, legal services. This is specifically for this loan closing. Okay, so if there are things where you had to pay for legal services specifically for the disaster loan, then you might want to disclose that. If there's anything else that you paid to someone specifically for this application, then you would mark other and describe that. But I'm going to tell you the most common one here is the loan packaging. If you went to a packaging service and they charged you $500 to assemble all of this information, fill out your forms and all of that, and had you review it and sign it, you would then put loan packaging, yes, and $500 because that's what you paid. Okay. Again, most of you, I believe, can put these forms together yourself and probably won't have to pay anybody to help you do that. There are a lot of resources out there like the SBDC, the chamber. People will help you get through this without having a cost. So I don't, for most of you, I think you're not going to need this form. But if you do pay, then again, you follow the rules for the compensation amount. The agent is the person who you paid, so they have to sign this form, print their name, print their business address, the date, and the phone number of the agent. Pretty straightforward. And then in the applicant's certification, you are signing there on behalf of your legal entity saying, yes, I did pay this person this much money. And the SBA tracks this stuff because they don't want agents making a lot of money off of these loans, and they have very strict rules of adherence to them. So that's good for the small business community. So that's the form, pretty straightforward. And if there are any questions on that, we can take them. But I'd kind of, for time's sake, I'd kind of like to go on to the personal financial statement and get through these last couple ones.
Can you just speak to the deadline on completing and submitting these forms?
I believe they have, I may be off on this, but I think they have like a 6-month window from the date of the disaster, maybe 9 months. Rich, do you know?
I think they actually have till the end of the year, till the end of December to submit. And then if they need to get additional funding, they can ask to amend the application, provide additional documentation, and I believe that period extends for 2 years from the disaster.
Great, thank you. Okay, the personal financial statement form. This one's a little bit more involved, but let's shrink this down a little bit so we can see the entire form. What I want to really focus on here is this document is a personal financial statement document. All right. So it's for each 20% or more owner has got to sign this form. All right. And complete it. So you're putting in your name, your business phone, your residential address, your residential phone, city, state, zip, and the business name of the applicant borrower. Then on the left, on the assets section, again, you're putting what assets you own personally. All right. So it's cash, savings, IRAs or 401k plans. If anybody owes you money, then you would list the total amount of money that is owed from people, either in the form of accounts or notes receivable. If you have a life insurance policy, okay, I'm going to go back for a minute. For your IRA, for example, and or other retirement account, think back, you had to answer that question earlier in the application process. So you need to be consistent with what you're filling out there. And again, in section 5 of this form, you will want to list what those IRA, 401k plans, TSP plans, whatever they are. And section 5 is on page 2 of this form. We don't have to go there, but just know that that's where you would put the additional information in. So you want to put who's the holder, what is the dollar amount, all right? When you're in the accounts and notes receivable, I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's say I sold a home and it was owner financed, and somebody is making payments to me monthly, then that's an example of a note receivable. If I lent someone $5,000 and they were going to repay me over time, again, that's an example of an account or a note receivable. And you would want to list that also in section 5 of this form, all right? For life insurance cash surrender value only, if you have a whole or universal life policy, then you have a cash value, and your insurance agent should be able to give you the most current value there, all right? And keep in mind, that has nothing to do with the face value of the policy or the benefit. All right, you can have a $250,000 or $500,000 life insurance policy, but that is not what they're asking for there. What they're asking for is your savings value tied to that life insurance policy. Again, it's only for whole or universal policies. If you have a term policy, you have no cash surrender value. All right, the next section is stocks and bonds. And again, what you want to do there in section 3 is detail out all the stocks and bonds that you own, market value currently, and if you need a separate document or you have a statement from your brokerage house, you could include that and say just see attached brokerage statement. That way you're not having to list everything out individually, all right? On the real estate piece, what I do want you to do, Andrea, if you could, is go to page 2. In section 4, it lists property A, B, C, etc. If you have more than 3 properties that you own, get a separate piece of paper and start writing them down, same information. What you need to know is tell the SBA, is it your residence? Is it a rental? What is it? Vacation home, whatever. And then what you're going to do is provide the address, date of purchase, what the original cost was, and what the present market value is. And think about what I said before. For market value, just go to Redfin or Zillow and get that piece taken care of. Okay. Am I getting the high sign? Okay.
My computer is just circling a little bit, Janie. So I don't know. We might have to go to I think it's the Adobe Acrobat suddenly stopped responding. So
Okay.
You might want to talk through other things.
I'm going to keep going on this form because it's pretty straightforward and the visual aid is great, but I just want everybody to hear kind of what else is on there. So the real estate is key to just getting market value and listing the debt amount and listing who the mortgage holder is, your mortgage account number, your monthly payment, and status of mortgage is more than likely current. They're talking about, are you delinquent or are you current on your mortgage? Okay, some other assets that they have listed are vehicles, personal property. Think about personal property as your furniture, your art, your jewelry, what other things that you may own, and any other assets that you may have are a catch-all. They are all described in Section 5 of this form. On the liability side, when they list accounts payable, typically what populates in there is your credit card debt. Notes payable to banks and others would be for things like a boat loan, an RV, any other type of note that you may have with a financial institution or non-financial institution where you're making payments. They do have a line for your vehicle loans and other installment accounts. Think about this. If you have a home improvement loan that is a term loan, that would go in an installment account. If you have a life insurance, a loan on your life insurance, you would want to disclose that on that line. And then mortgages, again, this is going to be the total mortgage balances that you list from Section 4 on that schedule. Unpaid taxes. Here's one thing I do want you to know. If you owe the IRS a tax obligation and you are on a payment plan, you are eligible for an SBA loan. If you are not on a payment plan with the IRS, then I would encourage you to get on a payment plan so that you would be eligible for an SBA loan. All right. Any other liabilities that you may have, just go ahead and list them. And your total liabilities deducted from your total assets is your net worth. All right. Now, here's the other thing. Section 1, which is on page 1. I want to go there really quickly because this answers some of that liability issue with the lease, etc. Okay, so down at the bottom it says section 1, sources of income. You want to put all your income in there and have that be consistent with what you put in the income sources prior in the application package. Your contingent liabilities, if you are a co-signer or co-maker on a loan. For example, let's say your child may have a student loan, okay? If you co-signed or guaranteed that loan, you are a co-maker and need to list that liability on that line, all right? If you are a guarantor, which is an endorser, in this form. If you're a guarantor on business debt, then you'd want to put that debt amount there on that line. If you have any legal claims and judgments, you'd put the dollar amount there. So I'm going to go back to that lease question. If you have a lease for your business and you personally guarantee it, you are an endorser of that lease. And again, that would be listed there. And what I would put is the total obligation on that lease that remains for the life of that lease. All right. So if your monthly payments, if your rent expense is $1,000 a month and you personally guaranteed that loan, forgive me. If your rent expense is $1,000 a month and you personally guaranteed that lease and you have 3 years left on the lease, your endorser dollar amount would be $36,000. Doing math in my head. Okay, so that's how you would treat that lease obligation and where you would put it on this package. And for any of those contingent liabilities, I would put a document together, a Word document, whatever, to identify what they are, to help the SBA loan officer understand what you have there. All right. And then on the last page, page 3, let me go back here for just a minute. Okay, so what I would say is for the signature, for the bank, when I'm doing this, because I'm in a community property state in Washington, right, as we are, we're required to get the signature of the business owner and their spouse on this form. I'm going to deviate from that recommendation at this particular moment. If you are the 100% owner of your business, and your spouse does not have 5% or more ownership in the business, I would just have you sign this form. And then if the SBA wants to get your spouse to sign it, they will ask you to do so. Okay. All right, and let's go on. Are there any questions on that?
A couple people are asking if this form is required for owners that have less than 20%.
No, it's 20% or more. Okay. All right, let's go on to the schedule of liabilities document, the 2202 form. Yeah. Do you have the actual schedule, not the instruction? For personal loans made to the business, on that form 413, the personal financial statement, you are going to list that as a note receivable because your legal entity owes you that money. Okay, so that is a note receivable from your business to you. And you should have on the business liabilities a corresponding loan due to shareholder or member or owner on the business liability section. And that would go on this form, which is, and I'm sorry, there is an actual schedule that's a little bit bigger. Can we blow that one up a little bit, enlarge it, maybe? Okay, so this schedule of liabilities is for the business debt. So the applicant is listed here, and the date of the schedule should match the last balance sheet you prepare. And so let's say the last balance sheet you prepared was through February 29th, 2020. Thank you. Perfect. The date of the schedule would be February 29th, 2020. And on your business balance sheet in the liability section, what you want to put in there is the name of the creditor that you owe money to for accounts payable, which are your vendors, notes payable, and if you have commercial real estate, a commercial loan, real estate loan. All right. So again, what you're putting here is the name of the creditor, the original amount of the date, the original amount of the debt, the original date the debt was incurred, what the current balance is, the status of payment. Are you current or are you delinquent? What is the maturity date of the loan or the obligation? How much do you pay? And you can put this in the form of either month or year, all right? If you're doing it by month, just put whatever the amount is, MO, or if you're doing it annually, just do the total payment amount and then put YR for year. If the obligation is unsecured, there's no collateral pledged, just put unsecured. If it is secured, tell us what it's secured by. Is it secured by accounts receivable, inventory, real estate, whatever, okay? So that's going to be applicable to each individual creditor. You're going to have to describe that. This document is extremely important because with this disaster loan product, it allows you to use the loan proceeds to make these payments. Okay, so clearly identifying how much is owed and what the payments are monthly will help the SBA loan disaster officer know how much they can include as eligible. And then you sign it and date it and put your title there. Okay, that one's pretty straightforward, and there is, again, an instructional form that Andrea had up there first. Are there any questions about that one? This is only the business debt, and it should match your most recent balance sheet. All right. The last document, and then I will be done, you won't have to hear me, is, okay, amount for business credit cards. Yes, business credit cards, your credit card company, B of A, whoever, you know, whatever the card name is the creditor name. And yes, the monthly payment varies, but what I want you to do is I want you to think about what the balance most recently was on that card and what the corresponding payment amount is for that particular card. Use the most recent statement that you have. If you have a credit card in your name, you're going to need to list that as part of your personal debt obligations. So that would go on the 413 form, personal financial statement. What I would also indicate as part of the comments sections on that for the personal financial statement form is that you can make a notation that this debt is paid by the business. Okay. And again, what I want you to think about is if you have more information that you can find a home for on this form, do a Word document and attach it with it as additional explanation, because the clearer you are for the loan officer, the easier it is for them to process your application efficiently. Okay. If you have the credit cards listed, okay, if you have a credit card that is in your personal name, but you list it on the liabilities for your business, make a notation that this debt on the business is really in your personal name. Okay, so again, be really clear, give them more information than you think they need to know on that particular issue. And it happens all the time, so you're not the only one that does that. So don't feel alone. Okay. Are there any other questions?
So I was just going to say, speaking of not being alone, you know, the chamber is always here for our local businesses, and so is the SBDC. So Janie, you mentioned, and we went through all of those documents in pretty good detail. Again, we're recording this so that when you do get to filling out those documents yourself, you can follow back and go over your great advice, and you know what to include, what not to include, what box to check, what box not to check. But Phon and Rich at the SBDC, along with the chamber, are also here, your partners, to help you not only with this application, but any other questions that you and your business might be facing right now. So I don't know, Phon, if you maybe just wanted to give a little introduction as to, you know, what you do at the SBDC, what the SBDC is, and then we can just open it up to questions, if that sounds good. So again, Janie, thank you so much for that detailed overview of going through the EIDL. So again, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. Or yes, it is. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phon Sivongxay. I am one of the certified business advisors for the SBDC at Highline College in Des Moines, Washington. And our work is really right now very crucial with assisting a lot of small businesses with this application. And we're really right now focusing on the application and getting it submitted, but everything that there's changes made every day. So questions being answered, and I think with this webinar, going over the application has been very helpful. But in the meantime, if businesses need help, they can reach out to the Small Business Development Center, Rich or myself, to kind of get guidance on completing the form and then getting it uploaded. And so that's kind of what we're here for technical assistance and services that they need assistance on. Rich, unless I'm overlooking anything, please feel free to chime in.
Oh, you did just fine. That's it.
So are we ready to move on to open questions? I have quite a few here still, specifically on forms, and then just some other broader questions as well. Do we feel good about that, Andrea? Okay.
Yes, let's take some Q&A.
Okay, so I'm going to start. I'll read the question, and then whoever feels most qualified to answer will go that way. I'll start with kind of the most recent and what has seemed most recently relevant. There's been a couple people that said that they recently filled out a form online, and since information is frequently changing, they wanted to know if they needed to go back and change anything or redo anything. Janie, this might be for you, but what do you suggest if somebody has filled out a form and now they have, you know, there's new information? Can you speak to that, please?
I'm going to say it like this. Effective March 25th, the SBA disaster loan application process changed to what we're presenting now. Okay. Prior to the 25th, you were able to go online on the disaster assistance website and fill out forms and submit an application. If you have done that piece, then just wait for a small business disaster loan officer to contact you. If you feel like now you filled out any of the information wrong, then I would update the form and have it at the ready. But other than that, you know, I would say don't resubmit because you've already been assigned a loan number. Does that answer your question?
We're going to assume yes unless I receive. Oh, yes, it says yes. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Okay, great. I've seen this come through a couple of times. Does the number of employees that a business has have any influence on the application approval process? Does it impact the approval at all?
Not that I'm aware of. I think you just need to be accurate about the number of employees that you had prior to the disaster, and how many you want to get back on deck. Rich, do you?
I agree. I mean, the whole purpose of these loans is to help the businesses survive and to retain employment. But I don't think they're going to say, you've got 50 employees and you've got 10, so we're going to help the 50 employee job. They're going to try to help everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, question clarifying the personal credit card being used on the business. It says, are you saying that we need to include the business credit cards in the personal financial statement and not on the 2202 form?
No, if the credit card is in your personal name, it should be listed on your personal financial statement, even if it's used for business purposes, because it will show up on your credit report when it's pulled. All right. And that's where that piece should be captured. If the business is making the monthly payment for it, then put that information on the personal financial statement form. So it's there. On the list of liabilities, that separate form, if you have the credit card debt listed on the business balance sheet, then disclose it there as well, okay? Because you need to have the documentation be consistent. And then what I am saying is, for my purposes, if I were analyzing it, I know how I would handle that, but I'm not an SBA disaster loan officer, so they may treat it differently, but you have to disclose it in both places so that the SBA loan officer understands how the obligation is being paid, because it's going to show up on your balance sheet for the business, and you don't want it to look like you forgot to list the debt. But it is going to show up on the credit report, so the loan officer needs to understand how these two things are interrelated. Does that clarify that?
Not seeing a reply just yet, but we'll move on. I had a question a while ago that came through asking, I apologize, I don't recall which form this was referring to, but they're asking, do you have to show a loss in revenue for a certain month before applying for the business disaster loan? So I believe, so for the business disaster loan, and if there wasn't a loss in revenue for the month of March when the disaster was declared, are they still able to apply?
Well, my response would be, you're applying because you have some type of economic injury. If you don't have economic injury, then there would be no reason to apply. So what you need to be able to describe is what your economic injury is. And if it's not evident from the revenue, then you're going to be providing other information regarding your operating expenses, and why you're having an economic injury. The one form that we didn't go over was Form 1368, and that one actually has the listing for 3 fiscal years and the current year to date by month of what your revenue is. And then the second page has you actually list, what your income and expenses are to more readily identify what that economic injury could be. So again, I have to say, if you're experiencing economic injury, you're going to need to be able to describe what that is numerically. Okay, and that's the purpose of this particular loan program. Rich, Phon?
Yeah, I would say that you got to remember that the loan isn't to replace your lost revenue, but your lost revenue is going to result in an adverse economic impact. So they're going to look at helping you fund the obligations like rent, lease, employees, utilities, which you're probably going to have a loss since you've had a drop in revenue. So you've got to think of it, as Janie said, what is my economic loss? Really, it will be relevant to revenue because a drop in revenue is not going to give you enough revenue to pay your expenses, and that's what this loan is to help do.
Great, thank you. I see that Phon has her hand raised, so I'm going to go over to Phon.
Janie, can you clarify? I have two things I need clarification on. The first question is, will the SBA, I'm sorry, will the SBA accept electronically signed form for now as part of the application process?
Well, with the way they're doing, I would say if you applied prior to March 25th, the answer would be yes, because those application documents were electronic and they were submitted electronically. I believe post March 25th, because you were manually filling out these forms, you'll have them before you upload them into the system for submission, so you should be able to sign them.
Okay. Second clarification, please. With the, well, I lost my train of thought. I might have to get back to you on this. I lost my train of thought. Janie, I might have to get back to you.
Okay.
Just want to say that, we will, again, make contact information available when we share the webinar too. And if anyone has any questions about, contacting or scheduling appointments, with the chamber or the SBDC or Janie, please feel free to reach out to us on our website, SeattleSouthsideChamber.com. And Rich, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, what I'd like to do is maybe Phon and I can give you our email addresses, and you could email us directly. So if you have a pencil in hand, my email is rshockley, which is RSHOCKLEY @highline.edu. And you can also reach me directly at 206-592-4150. I'll let you give your information, but you could also go visit our website at sbdc.highline.edu.
Yes, and my information is, if you need to get a hold of me by phone, number's 206-592-3220. And then my email address is P as in Paul, and then my last name is SIVONGXAY @highline.edu.
Thank you, guys. And I've typed all that into the chat, so you guys should be seeing that as well if you didn't get a chance to jot it down. We have about 8 minutes left. Do we want to try and squeeze in a few more questions?
You know what? I have a couple of other just comments for you for resources for money. For everybody that has a business in the state of Washington, I would encourage you to go to the State of Washington Department of Commerce and look at the products that they have related to COVID-19 and the other grant programs that they have, because you may be in a business that can take advantage of some of the other grant programs that they have listed on their website. The other thing that was rolled out a few days ago was a $25,000 economic injury disaster loan that the financial institutions like mine who participate in SBA guaranteed loans are able to process. It is on a bank by bank and credit union by credit union basis. So if you have a loan relationship with an existing lender, I would encourage you to go to your lender and ask them if they are participating in the EIDL bridge loan product. Again, it's $25,000. If you are applying for an SBA disaster loan, they may do it short term and have you use the disaster loan proceeds to pay off that idle bridge loan. If not, then it can have a maturity of up to 7 years. The interest rate on it is approximately 9.5%, so it's a little bit pricey and not one that I would use, you know, necessarily long term, but you know, that product is available through the financial institutions, both credit unions and commercial banks.
Great, thank you, Janie. I actually have a couple people with similar questions that they've started their online application process previously, but didn't get to the actual completion of it. They've received an application number, so should they try to go back in and complete it, or should they start over from scratch?
Unfortunately, they can't. If you go back into the website, and I was kind of shocked myself yesterday when I got in there in the morning, unless something's changed as of this morning. If you had an electronic application in and it was partially completed, I'm going to tell you, I think you're going to have to start from scratch because you can't log in to that website, or you couldn't as of yesterday, and complete that application. So it's a little bit troubling, but I'm not sure what else to tell you there.
Janie, could I follow up with a question to you on that? If they got far enough through the application where they were assigned an application number, wouldn't it be going to a loan underwriter? And then they come back and say we're missing all this information?
Well, it could. I actually had one of my former customers get through the application and they were in it right away, and they had a 24-hour turnaround, and they were provided a list of documents that they needed to submit. That was last week. And the challenge here is if you had the application partially completed but not submitted, I'm not sure they received it. Okay, that's the problem. So you could have an application number, but it's in limbo because it was not fully through the process. And that's, and I'm going to tell you, I was on the phone twice with the Small Business Disaster Loan Center yesterday, and I was on hold for, you know, a long time. And that was one question that I didn't ask, my apologies. But I mean, you could always call the Assistance Center line. It's an 800 number, and stay on hold while you're doing other things, and then ask them to check your assistance loan number and see what they want you to do. Right, yes, that application number is assigned at the very beginning. Yeah, I know, because I applied. And So this is the problem. I don't have an answer that's correct or wrong, one or the other. But if you didn't go through the whole process and actually submit, then you might want to call the disaster loan office and just stay on hold. Again, do something else, you know, and stay on hold till you get somebody and have them check that number and then have them give you direction.
So I think this might be our final question, but there was one that came in that just was asking about what that timeline looks like as far as the application process, application to funding received. What can people expect on that timeline?
Well, clearly my gentleman had a 24-hour turn time, but he got in really early and was one of the first applicants in the system. What the SBA is saying is allow 2 to 3 weeks for the application processing. That's what they have on their website. However, when I was on a call with the district office in California last Thursday, they said, I'm sorry, I was actually talking to the Small Business Loan Center last Wednesday, and they said as the applications roll in, they've got about 100 employees that are working in that center. And they said that the farther we get into this, it may take 4 to 6 weeks for a turn time. So 2 to 3 likely, but if there's a large volume, it could be 4 to 6 weeks. The other thing, when I was on the conference call with the California district office, because my institution is headquartered in California, they said that for loan requests up to and equal to $500,000, they were not going to request tax returns. And they were only going to request tax returns if the loan amount exceeded $500,000. So I'm just passing that along. And I think that's why they're asking for that 4506T form instead of the returns. I will tell you that my customer was asked to supply company prepared 2019 and 2020 balance sheets and income statements. He was asked to do a 2-year cash flow projection. He has owned his business for 2 years, and it was in operation at least 10 years prior to the time he acquired it. So there was a lot of financial information available for the SBA. So I think they're going to be doing this a little bit on a case-by-case basis, and have a little patience and bear with them. I think some of the new products that are being rolled out as part of the CARES Act will modify what we're going to advocate for you to do after this presentation.
Thank you again. And so again, Andrea Ray with the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce, just want to say thank you all so much. We had, almost 200 people there, for a while joining us on the webinar. And again, we're going to make it available for you to watch later as you start to fill out that paperwork. And we will continue to bring you these opportunities as part of our Southside Mitigation and Recovery Task Force. Really grateful for our subject matter experts, our presenters, chamber staff and board that have allowed us to pivot how we connect and how we convene and how we continue to serve our community. Again, really appreciate you making the time to join us today. Be well, be safe. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.